Hello, I'm sorry we can't meet in person today. I'm going to try to walk you through Pro Tools first. Um, when you first load it up for the first time, there will be a bunch of error windows or little announcements. Generally, one of the good things about Pro Tools is that the default answer is almost always right. In this case, it's looking for licenses for other plugins that I have in the full-featured Pro Tools. I can ignore those. It'll potentially talk about your input output device. Okay, so when you open this up, it'll say create, and then there will be a whole bunch of different templates. I would ignore those, avoid those. Instead of creating from template, uncheck that box, and let's call it Pro Tools demo or something like that. Pro Tools first is great because it has most of the same controls and abilities that regular Pro Tools does. The one exception is it saves to the cloud. It won't save to your computer per se, which is weird, but there you go. Okay, so we've opened a blank session. I'll talk a little bit about the geography here. Let me see. We'll start by going track, new. So we're going to record a track to record into. How many do we want? Just one. Mono or stereo? Well, I'm recording in my voice, so it's going to be a mono sound source, so mono is fine. Audio track, we could also have these other types of tracks. And then we can name it whatever we want to. So I'll name it Matt, because that's me, and then I'll create it. And so it just built a track here in the edit window. So this is where I'm going to do most of my work. Very similar to an edit window in Premiere or other programs you're used to using. It's got the track name. If I wanted to change the name, I could just double click on that and name it whatever I wanted to. This is important because the recordings will be named according to what the track name is. And so if you want to go back 3 months from now and work on a session, it's important to know that this is a saxophone or the voice as opposed to audio 0101.wave or something like that. Okay, first thing to check is setup to see if it figured out the right hardware to use. Mine is probably going to look different than yours. In this case, it's looking for a Pro Tools aggregate I/O. Yours might default directly to MacBook Pro microphone for input and Pro speakers for output. If there's going to be a source of problem today, that's going to be the one. So if I go to play it back and there's no input and output charted, then we're in for some rough sailing, and that would all be under the Pro Tools hardware or playback engine tabs. But it looks like it's got an input and output charted, so that's great. Okay, to record stuff, here on the track, I'll do record enable right here. Check 1, 2, 3. So you can see that my voice is causing the VU meter to go up and down. If you're having a problem with that, go over to this other window. If I go window and then mix, then it'll bring up this. And so if you're familiar with the analog mixing console we went through a couple weeks ago, this is just exactly the same as that. Here's the fader at the bottom. There's a pan pot, solo and mute and input, which you're familiar with. And then these are inserts for EQ or limiters or other effects like reverb and things like that we'll work with later. Okay, so if for some reason it's not coming in, this is the input path. So it's saying MacBook Pro microphone, and here's the output path, and it should be output 1, 2 stereo. That's kind of the default. So I've got audio. Hopefully you do too. If you don't, send me an email and we'll talk. Okay, so, but I'm not recording yet. Why not? I need to tell Pro Tools that I want to record all in all. So if we had 20 tracks here, then the little red LED over here is indicating I want to record on this track, and then the LED at the transport window at the top is saying I'm ready to record. And then I can either hit this play button or hit the space bar to start recording. So hopefully on your lecture notes you've got a script that you should read, and it goes like this. I cannot use Pro Tools. It is way too hard to learn in school. Okay, and then I'll hit the play button when I'm done with that. Let's play that back. And now it's important when you do this yourself to enunciate and pronounce everything. So don't say, I can't use Pro Tools, it's way too hard, because that won't work for what we're doing here. Okay, to zoom in, we could either use this, so let's go to the top bar here and look at some of the tools. I could either use this zoom bar and then just highlight the whole bit I want, and that'll spread it out. Or in the full version of Pro Tools, there will be another zoom in and out right over here that's missing. So in order to zoom in, I'll do Command key on a Mac, bracket right will zoom in, bracket left will zoom out. So basically I just want to see the waveform a bit. So that's the magnification tool. The next one over is the trimmer tool. I call it the oh, there it is, trim tool. I usually call it the splice mover tool just because I'm silly that way. But let's say I think I'm chattering at the beginning here. Let's see. Space bar to start recording. So hopefully on your lecture notes you've got a script that you should read, and it goes like this. Okay, so I'm going to take all that out and just scroll back to the end there, and I'll do the same thing at the end. Let me see, I can go up here. Cool. Okay, so I have some extra dead air there. So take a second right now and go ahead and record that. I cannot use Pro Tools. It is way too hard to learn in school. And then play it back and then cut off the heads and tails of that and clean it up. I'll wait here while you do that. Okay. Hopefully you had success. It's nice if the size of the waveform is about this high. I mean, if it's much too big, that means you've probably distorted and overmodulated. If it's much too small, it's just going to be really hard to read. So we've already done the trim tool. The next one over is the selector tool. And that is really where we're going to be doing all the editing. So basically this lets you move. If I wanted to start playing from any place here, I can use the selector in the little rulers above the waveform, or I can click actually right on the waveform. Not use Pro Tools. It is way too hard to learn in school. So the next one over is the grabber tool, the whole hand, and that's going to move the whole clip as a piece. The next one over is a pencil, which isn't really useful for this. It's good for writing automation or actually for some MIDI use, but we'll talk about that much later. So let's go to the selector tool, and I realize that this is kind of a negative statement. I cannot use Pro Tools. It is way too hard to learn in school. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so I can see it better. I can just do that by grabbing the bottom of that track. And I'll zoom in a little bit so I can see that better. I can move this soap bar at the bottom to figure out exactly what I want. But let's take out the word not. I cannot use Pro Tools. I can use Pro Tools. So let's play through. I cannot use Pro Tools. Okay, so I want to figure out exactly where the not comes. I cannot use. So it's kind of looks to me like it's the last half of this blob. So I'm just going to highlight the last half of this blob and hit delete. Now the problem is it left a hole. So what I really want to do is delete that bit and then move it forward. So I'll undo, Command Z, undo is your best friend. So there are 4 different editing modes. Slip keeps everything in sync, so that if I take something out in the middle, if there's a cough or something, then the rest of the song or whatever we're working on will remain in sync. But what I want to do is shuffle. So I want it, so when I take this bit out, it'll slam the other 2 halves together. So I'll do that, hit the delete key, and now I can go back here a little bit and I can use Pro Tools. I can use Pro Tools. Okay, that's okay. It's not brilliant. It's okay. Because it's never going to be perfect because we're trying to make it say something it didn't say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom way in and look at this. Can I use Pro Tools? I can use Pro Tools. Okay, so I'm getting a little bit of residue here. So I'm going to move the splice just a hair here and a hair here. And then I'm going to go back to the selector tool and highlight just the area of that, just an 1/8 of an inch on either side, and hit Command F. And that's going to create a crossfade. Crossfades are the sound editor's best friends, because if there's ever a pop or a click or just something, then a crossfade will make it sound much less obnoxious. Okay, let's try this. I can use Pro Tools. Not great. Sounds like I'm breathing or something, but it's better than nothing.
I can use Pro Tools. It is way too hard to learn in school.
Okay, so let's take a second now and take the knot out of yours. So I'll wait. Okay. Okay, so now let's play that back, and it sounds great. Yay. Now let's go to the second one. It is way too hard to learn in school. No, it's not. It is way cool. So let's see if we can do that. Now this is going to be impossible because the syllables just aren't the same, but let's see what we can do.
Use Pro Tools. It is way too hard to learn in school.
Okay, I'll zoom out a little bit. I'm doing a lot of zooming, so learning the command bracket is really useful here. So
it is way too hard to
Okay, so here's the end of way right here. If I want to, I can go up here and drop a marker here just to let me know that's the end of way.
Too hard to learn in school.
Okay, learn in school. Now, on the full version of Pro Tools, there's one more tool here that looks like a speaker with sound waves coming over it. That's a scrub tool, and it lets us go so it's just like scrubbing quarter-inch tape across a reel-to-reel head so you can find out exactly where the syllable starts and ends. We don't have that facility here, but if we look really carefully as it's playing by, maybe we can see where the s happens.
Learn in school. Learn in school. In school.
So it looks to me like this is the s. So I'll put another marker here for school. And then basically I'm just going to use the selector tool and highlight from the end of the s back to my marker for way. Got that? I'll zoom out so you can see it. And now I'll go back into shuffle mode and hit delete. And this is going to be sucky, but we'll give it a shot.
Way cool.
Oh my gosh, it's beautiful.
It is way cool.
That's the best it's ever been. Usually it's way cool, but I think maybe I cheated and said school, so I added a little k in the middle of that. So if you're having trouble editing that, just add a little k in the middle, and that's okay. So here's what I ended up with.
I can use Pro Tools. It is way cool.
It is way cool. I'm going to go back to slip mode and save things, because anytime I do something I like, I'm going to save it afterwards in case there's like a terrible failure. It's actually saving to the cloud instead of to my machine, as I mentioned before, but that's okay. Let us bring in some music. So I've put on Foxtail a couple of little MP3s. I'll find one from my very own folder, but just some music to have as the background for this. Here we go. Okay, so I've got 3 pieces of music on the Foxtail page. Django Reinhardt is kind of gypsy jazz. I'll use Superman, which is the theme from the Superman movie, the Christopher Reeves one, and then Toys, which is kind of an electronic Europop kind of thing. So there's 2 ways I can bring music in. I can go into Pro Tools and say import and then navigate to the clip, or I can just drag and drop. So I'll drag that into an empty bit under my track, and it's now basically rewriting this song to my hard drive. I'm actually have a different external hard drive for this project, and so that's why it took a certain amount of time to go. I'll play through this.
I can use Pro Tools. It is way cool.
Okay, so first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take off all the, oops, I don't want to do that, undo. So what happened is I had both tracks highlighted, so when I started moving this, it started impacting both tracks, so I don't want to do that. So I'll take all of the dead air off the front, and then shift to my gripper tool, my grabber tool, and move this just a few seconds before the start. So my goal here is to have a certain amount of music that establishes, and then we'll pull underneath the voice, and then have a big, exciting conclusion. You'll notice I'm starting here, it looks like at 3 seconds in. This doesn't matter at all. This is just a counter. I can start right at 0 if I'm very OCD, or I can just start anywhere. And as long as when I export it, I tell it where the begin and end, it's fine, doesn't matter. So don't worry about that. So let's see what this sounds like.
I can use Pro Tools. It is way cool.
Okay, fine. So I know I'm going to be out of the music by here, so I'll just make a little clip here, and then use the grabber tool, highlight the rest of this, hit delete, and that's out. If you're like me, it's hard to hear the dialogue. I'd also like to start this a little bit earlier. So I'm switched to the selector tool. I'll highlight everything, switch to the grabber, and move this a little bit forward like that. And now I'd like to make this, I want to play with the dialogue. Let's do some stuff. So we've got some plugins here. I'll insert an EQ. And I'm on itty bitty speakers, so it's always dangerous to do EQ that way because you can't really hear what's going on. You'll remember from when we talked about mixing boards that there's solo and mute on each of these channels. So I'm going to solo up the dialogue and listen to that. And I'm going to use this EQ to brighten it up. I'm going to add a little more treble to it.
I can use Pro Tools. It is way cool.
And if I want to, I can just highlight this using the scrub tool. And then if I hit Control, right click on the play thing, I can either make it loop or go normal. So I'll make it loop so I hear it over and over.
Pro Tools. It is way cool. I can use Pro Tools. It is way cool.
And this is also a good way to drive people insane if you'd like to. All right. In addition to that, I mean, there's all sorts of interesting things we can do here. So let's throw some reverb on this puppy. Deverb is actually a very nice reverb. It defaults to mono, but reverb is usually a very stereo kind of sound. So when I hit the mono to stereo, it's going to create a stereo effect here. Here's one of the confusing things. Number 12. When you first bring it in, it's going to sound like you're at the bottom of a well.
I can use Pro Tools.
Way too much reverb. So it took me about 10 minutes one day to find the magic slider here is the mix between dry and wet. So dry is the unprocessed sound, wet is completely reverb. Usually around 25-30% is about right.
I can use Pro Tools.
So it sounds like it's in a concert hall rather than at the bottom of a well or something like that. Okay, let's see how we're doing. Let me take the solo off.
I can use Pro Tools. It is way cool.
That is way cool. I want it way cooler, so I'm muting the dialogue. I'm going to highlight this. There's two kinds of sound effects processing in Pro Tools. There's the real-time processing, which you use these plugins for here. There's also something called Audio Suite at the very top here. And so I've highlighted the bit that I want to process. I'll go into Audio Suite, maybe pitch shift. Who's the character in Star Wars? Kylo Ren. So let's say I want to give it kind of a Kylo Ren vibe. So there's a pitch changer here in the bottom, and I'll go down maybe 3 or 4 notes. Let's see what that's like.
I can use Pro Tools. It is way cool. I can use Pro Tools.
Okay, that sounds about right. So the little speaker in the left corner is the audition, and then when I find exactly the pitch I want, then I'll hit render. And I could do the same thing and make it chipmunky, or I could make it reverse with some of these other, there's reverse, there's time compression, so I could make it, very fast, like the disclaimer at the end of a used car ad or something like that. So now we've got Kylo Ren with reverb.
I can use Pro Tools. It is way cool.
And I'm going to add that to the Superman theme.
I can use Pro Tools. It is way cool.
That's great. I'll save it because I like it. But it would be nice if we could hear Kylo Ren better. So what I want the music to do is start out big and then pull down under the voice and then get big at the end again. There's a couple ways we can do that. In Pro Tools, there's a couple ways of doing just about anything. So here we see in the edit window, right now it's got the waveform showing, but there's many ways you can visualize the data, including volume. So now there's a line, just like you used to in Premiere and other programs, that I can put keyframes on, and I can do that with either the pencil tool or the hand tool. But I'm going to try it a little differently. So I'm used to mixing sound kind of in real time. So if I want to boost the music for the crowning moment of the movie, I can do that. So I'm going to turn on some automation here. which I do. So these are the tracks. Here's the Superman track. And I'll go here where it says auto for automation and change it from automatic auto read, so it's reading automation, to auto touch. And what that's going to do is anytime I touch this fader, it's going to record that movement and then I can reproduce it later. So let's give it a try. Starting out big, under the voice, back up. Here we go. Going down.
I can use Pro Tools. It is way cool.
Back up. Maybe really big here. And fading out. Okay, so, yay, now if I wanted to, I could go in and manipulate each of these keyframes that it just wrote. I'm okay with that. It kind of works. So I'm going to move back out of volume, back to waveform. And it sounded a little bit clipped. So now I'm going to stretch out the end of this to like that. And let me audition that. And you'll notice when I play it back, the fader will move. There it goes. So it basically is the little robot, little ghost doing all the fader moves for you, which is nice. Okay, now that we've got the perfect mix for all mankind, I can go in and basically mix this out, export it as an MP3 or a WAV file. So to do that, I'm going to highlight, in this case, the music runs the whole length. I want to tell Pro Tools somehow how much of the material I want to record, because if there was a little tiny blip of sound, 10 minutes down, it's going to record the whole 10 minutes. So I can do this either by highlighting it and scrubbing from top to bottom, or in this case, I'll just use the grabber tool and select the longest track, and that should be fine. Okay, so this is the only weird thing. File, export, audio mix, and the mixdown source is the output. That's fine. I can use a WAV file, AIF, or MP3. I'll use MP3. So it defaults to the document folder, which is fine. If I have this little offline button clicked, it will do it super fast. It won't wait for me. So that's what I want to do. It's going to ask data, metadata. I don't care. That's fine. It just bounced it. And now if I go to my documents folder, I'd find this. So your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to go in, choose some music. It doesn't have to be one of those three. It can be anything from the internet that you want. Record the I can use Pro Tools, cut it down so it's an optimistic message. Add some weird old effects. There's tons and tons of interesting effects on the full version. There's a lot of interesting things. Try the backwards one, pitch change it, make it time compressed or expanded, do some weird crap, and export it as an MP3, and then put it on the server. And there's instructions at the bottom of the assignment sheet on how to do that. All right, good luck. Email me if you have problems, and I'll try to get back to you as quickly as I can. Thank you. Hang in there. See you later. Hi, me again. So instead of saving this to the server, why don't you put it on Foxtail? So name it after yourself. This is Matt's Pro Tools demo, and save it as an MP3 onto the Foxtail site. Great, thanks. Stay safe.